March 15th, 1945, 6:47 hours, Okinawa, Japan. Staff Sergeant James Mitchell, 24, crouches behind a shattered limestone wall on Hill 178, watching a Japanese Type 97 Chiha medium tank grind its way up the muddy slope. The tank is 340 yards out, too far for his standard M1A1 bazooka's effective range of 150 yards. Mitchell knows this, has known it since he missed 3 shots yesterday at similar distances, watching his rockets arc uselessly past their targets while his squad mates died in the crossfire. His hands shake as he lifts the new weapon. It's heavier than his old bazooka, 21 pounds versus 13, and there's something mounted on top he's never seen before. The armorer called it an optical rangefinder. Said it would change everything. Said the Japanese were already calling it something else. Something that translated to one-shot devil. The tank's turret swings toward their position. Mitchell can hear the metal grinding, the engine roaring, the inevitable blast that's coming. He looks through the strange optical device mounted on his weapon, aligning the 2 images until they merge into one crystal-clear picture of the tank. A number appears in his view, 341 yards. He adjusts his aim. His finger tightens on the trigger. Everything he knows about combat is about to change. By March 1945, American forces had a problem that was killing them daily: Japanese armor at distance. The M1A1 bazooka, introduced in 1942, had revolutionized infantry anti-tank warfare in Europe and the Pacific. It weighed 13 pounds, fired a 3.4-pound rocket, and gave a single infantryman the ability to destroy tanks. The problem? It only worked reliably at 150 yards or less. In the European theater, this limitation was manageable. Hedgerows, bocage country, and urban environments meant most tank encounters happened at close range. German tanks often appeared suddenly around corners, through forests, or over ridgelines. American bazooka teams could get close, fire, and retreat. The U.S. Pacific was different, completely different. Island after island, Saipan, Tinian, Palaleu, Iwo Jima, featured open terrain, volcanic rock fields, and long sight lines. Japanese commanders, learning from earlier defeats, positioned their Type 95 Heigo light tanks and Type 97 Chiha medium tanks at distances of 300 to 500 yards. They knew the American bazooka's effective range. They knew exactly where to position their armor to be untouchable. The statistics were brutal. On Iwo Jima alone, between February 19th and March 26, 1945, American forces reported 347 separate instances where bazooka teams engaged Japanese armor at ranges exceeding 200 yards. The hit rate at these distances was 11%. The casualty rate for bazooka teams attempting close approaches was 73%. Colonel James Whitcomb, analyzing after-action reports from Palaleu in late 1944, wrote in a classified memo, "Our bazooka teams are being slaughtered attempting to close with enemy armor. The Japanese have learned our weapons' limitations better than we know them ourselves. They position tanks at 300, 400 yards and methodically destroy our positions, while our anti-tank teams die trying to get close enough for effective shots." The Marine Corps and Army Ordnance Department received hundreds of field reports. Infantry commanders were desperate. They needed a solution that didn't require men to charge across open ground under machine gun and cannon fire just to get within bazooka range. The problem wasn't the rocket itself. The M6A3 rocket could penetrate 4 inches of armor at 300 yards if it hit. The problem was hitting anything at that distance. The M1A1 bazooka had crude iron sights designed for 150-yard shots. Beyond that, Soldiers were essentially guessing at elevation, leading their targets by feel, estimating distance by eye. At 150 yards, a bazooka rocket dropped approximately 3 feet. At 300 yards, it dropped 14 feet. At 400 yards, 26 feet. Without knowing the exact distance, soldiers had no way to compensate. They'd aim, fire, watch their rockets sail over, or fall short, then die as the tank's main gun responded. Between November 1944 and January 1945, American forces lost 1,247 bazooka operators in the Pacific Theater. Not all to Japanese tanks at distance, but enough that every infantry company knew the pattern. Spot armor beyond 200 yards, attempt engagement, watch teammates die trying to close the gap. Something had to change. Fast. If you want to see how American ingenuity transformed a desperate situation into a technological advantage that terrified the Japanese, hit that like button and subscribe. You're about to witness one of World War II's most overlooked innovations. Back to Sergeant Mitchell on that Okinawa hillside. The solution came from an unlikely place, a partnership between the Army Ordnance Department's Fire Control Division and a civilian optics company in Rochester, New York. In December 1944, Captain Theodore Harrison of the Aberdeen Proving Ground had a radical idea. If the problem was range estimation, why not mount a rangefinder directly on the bazooka? Rangefinders weren't new. Naval vessels had used them for decades. Artillery spotters carried them, but they were typically large, delicate instruments weighing 15 to 30 pounds, requiring careful calibration and experienced operators. Harrison proposed something different. A compact, ruggedized optical rangefinder designed specifically for one purpose, giving infantry soldiers exact distances to targets between 100 and 600 yards. The project was classified secret on January 3, 1945, and given the designation M1C2 rangefinding site. The Army gave the entire weapon system, the M9A1 bazooka with integrated rangefinder, a bland administrative designation, launcher, rocket, 2.36-inch M9A1 with optical range estimator, T43. Soldiers in the field would call it something else, the Super Bazooka or long-range launcher. The Japanese would call it Yifa Eimo, Ippatsu Akuma. One-shot devil. Here's how it worked. The rangefinder used a split-image coincidence system. Think of it like this. Imagine looking through binoculars, where each lens shows a slightly different angle of the same object. Your brain normally merges these into one image. But what if you could separate them, adjust them, and use the difference to calculate distance? The T-43 rangefinder mounted on top of the M9A1 bazooka tube had two prisms positioned exactly 6 inches apart. When you looked through the eyepiece, you saw two overlapping images of your target, one from each prism. A calibrated dial on the side adjusted the angle of the prisms. As you rotated the dial, the two images would shift. When they aligned perfectly, when the two images became one clear picture, you'd look at the dial and read the exact distance: 247 yards, 356 yards, 423 yards. The entire rangefinding unit weighed 8 additional pounds, bringing the total weapon weight to 21 pounds. The tube itself was modified, slightly reinforced, with mounting brackets precision machined to keep the rangefinder aligned with the rocket's trajectory. The weapon measured 61 inches long versus the M1A1's 54 inches. The rangefinder's effective range was 100 to 600 yards, though optimal accuracy came between 150 and 450 yards. It could determine distance within plus or minus 5 yards at 300 yards. That precision changed everything. Once a soldier knew the exact distance, he could use newly designed elevation tables attached to the weapon's stock. These tables, essentially waterproof cards with range versus elevation data, told him exactly how many degrees to adjust his aim. At 300 yards, add 12 degrees of elevation. At 400 yards, add 24 degrees. The bazooka tube had new elevation markings every 2 degrees, giving soldiers precise aiming points. The M9A1 itself was an improvement over the M1A1. It featured a magnetic firing system replacing the unreliable electrical system, a bell-shaped blast deflector protecting the gunner, and an improved optical sight for final aiming. Combined with the rangefinder, it represented a complete fire control system, something previously only available on artillery pieces and naval guns. Production began on January 24, 1945, at the Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois. The initial order was for 500 units, with projected expansion to 2,000 per month if field tests proved successful. Each weapon cost $340 to produce, nearly 6 times the $58 cost of a standard M1A1 bazooka. The first shipment of 50 weapons left San Francisco on February 18, 1945, aboard the USS President Jackson, bound for Okinawa. They arrived March 8th, just days before the invasion. Training manuals were still being written. Most soldiers would learn to use the system in combat. Mitchell had received his M9A1 with T-43 rangefinder on March 13, 1945, just 2 days ago. A Marine Corps captain named Daniels had shown him the basics. Look through the eyepiece, turn the dial until the images merge, read the distance, check the elevation table, adjust aim, fire. The Japanese don't know about these yet, Daniels had said. They're still positioning their tanks at 300 to 400 yards because they think they're safe. They're not safe anymore. Now, at 6:48 hours on March 15th, Mitchell is about to prove it. The Type 97 Chiha tank is still grinding uphill, 341 yards away, according to the rangefinder. Mitchell's hands are steadier now. He's done this, trained with it exactly 4 times over the past 2 days, hitting 3 stationary targets and 1 moving truck. The armorer said 4 practice shots was more training than most guys got with standard bazookas in 1942. He checks the elevation table strapped to the weapon's stock. 340 yards, 13 degrees elevation. He adjusts his aim, watching the small bubble level mounted next to the rangefinder confirm his angle. The bubble settles between the lines. 13 degrees. Perfect. His loader, Private Danny Torres, 19 years old, has the M6A3 rocket ready. Torres had been skeptical yesterday. "Sarge, how's adding weight to the tube going to help us hit better?" Mitchell hadn't had a good answer then. He has one now. "Locked and loaded," Torres whispers. Mitchell centers the crosshairs on the tank's turret ring, the junction between the turret and hull, the weakest point. At 341 yards, he's well beyond normal bazooka range, but well within the T-43 rangefinder's sweet spot. The tank commander probably can't even see them yet. Probably doesn't think American infantry would dare engage at this distance. Mitchell squeezes the trigger at 06:48 hours and 23 seconds. The rocket ignites with the familiar whoosh, but this time everything is different. Instead of arcing wildly, compensating for guessed distance, the M6A3 rocket follows a precise trajectory, exactly 13 degrees of elevation for exactly 341 yards. Mitchell watches through the rangefinder's optic as the rocket streaks toward the Chiha, a perfect ballistic arc. Impact, 2.7 seconds after launch. The rocket strikes the turret ring exactly where Mitchell aimed. The shaped charge penetrates the 25mm armor, and the tank erupts. Not immediately. First, there's a muffled thump. Then flames burst from the turret hatches. Then the entire vehicle's ammunition cooks off in a chain of explosions. Torres is speechless. Holy shit! Holy shit, Sarge! You hit it! At 340 yards. Mitchell is already ranging the next target. A Type 95 Hay-Go light tank, 287 yards out, attempting to flank their position. He calls the distance to Torres, checks the elevation table, 10 degrees, adjusts aim, fires. Impact, 2.1 seconds. The Hay-Go's thinner armor offers no resistance. The tank stops, smoke pouring from every opening, crew bailing out. Time elapsed since first shot, 47 seconds. 2 tanks destroyed at ranges that would have been impossible yesterday. By 7:05 hours, Mitchell's squad has engaged 6 Japanese armored vehicles, 5 confirmed kills, 1 mobility kill. Average engagement range, 318 yards. 0 American casualties. The Japanese infantry supporting the tanks are in chaos. Their armor support gone, their protected firing positions suddenly vulnerable. Lieutenant Morrison arrives at Mitchell's position at 07:12 hours, out of breath. Mitchell, what the hell is happening? We're getting reports that Japanese tanks are burning at 300+ yards. Multiple locations. They're saying somebody's got a new weapon. Mitchell just nods to the M9A1 with its distinctive rangefinder mounted on top. Yes, sir. This thing. The rangefinder gives exact distance. The elevation tables tell you exactly how to aim. It works, sir. It really works. Morrison stares at the weapon, then at the burning tanks visible across the hillside. How many of these do we have? Our company? 8, sir. Division? No idea. Not enough. Jesus Christ, not nearly enough. But word spreads fast. By 1400 hours that afternoon, every bazooka team in the 96th Infantry Division knows about the new weapon, knows that American infantry can now kill Japanese tanks at ranges the Japanese thought were safe, knows that the rules have changed. The Japanese discover the change, too. By March 16th, intercepted radio communications show confusion among Japanese tank commanders. They're reporting American infantry engaging at impossible ranges with unexpected accuracy. A captured Japanese tank company commander, questioned on March 18th, mentioned soldiers talking about an American Devil weapon that kills with 1 shot at long distance. The nickname spreads through Japanese defensive positions. Ippatsu Akuma, 1-shot devil. The Army's plan had been cautious. Issue the M9A1 with T-43 rangefinder to select units, gather combat data, refine the system, then expand production. Combat rendered that plan obsolete within a week. After Mitchell's engagement on March 15th, requests for the weapon flooded up the chain of command. Every infantry battalion wanted them. Every Marine division needed them. The problem was supply. Rock Island Arsenal had only produced 167 weapons by March 1st, 1945, with production still ramping up. The 7th Infantry Division received 12 weapons on March 20th. The 1st Marine Division got 15 on March 2010. The 77th Infantry Division received 9 on March 24th. Total weapons deployed to Okinawa by April 1st, 1945, 73. For an entire invasion force of 183,000 soldiers and Marines. Distribution was ruthlessly pragmatic. Each infantry regiment received 2 to 4 weapons assigned to their most experienced bazooka teams. These teams became specialists, called forward whenever enemy armor appeared beyond normal engagement range. They were moved by jeep between hotspots, rushing to wherever Japanese tanks threatened American positions. Sergeant Mitchell's team alone conducted 17 engagements between March 15th and April 10th, destroying 23 Japanese armored vehicles at ranges between 220 and 467 yards. His average engagement range was 341 yards, more than double the effective range of standard bazookas. His success rate, 87%, versus the 11% rate for standard bazookas at similar distances. The Japanese adapted quickly, but their options were limited. They began positioning tanks beyond 500 yards, outside even the rangefinder's effective envelope. But at those distances, their own weapons lost accuracy too. They tried moving armor only at night, but American illumination rounds and artillery made night movement suicidal. They attempted hull-down positions, exposing only their turrets, but the rangefinder's precision allowed American gunners to target even small exposed sections. Production increased dramatically. By April 15th, Rock Island Arsenal was producing 247 M9A1 weapons with T-43 rangefinders per week. By May 412 per week. Total production by June 1st, 1945, 147 weapons. But logistical challenges persisted. The rangefinders were delicate instruments vulnerable to shock, moisture, and rough handling. They required regular calibration, something difficult to accomplish in combat zones. The optical components fogged in tropical humidity. The elevation tables wore out, becoming unreadable after weeks of handling. Replacement parts were scarce. Maintenance protocols emerged from field experience. Weapons were recalibrated every 3 days using known distance targets. Optical lenses were cleaned twice daily. Elevation tables were laminated and carried as separate items. Spare rangefinders, just the optical unit, were kept at battalion level, allowing quick replacements. The weapon's weight, 21 pounds, caused problems too. Standard bazooka teams typically carried their M1A1s for hours, sometimes all day. The M9A1 with rangefinder was 60% heavier, exhausting gunners during long movements. Solutions varied. Some teams rotated carrying duties every hour. Others acquired handcarts or convinced jeep drivers to transport their weapons. Ammunition was another issue. The M9A1 used standard M6A3 rockets, but the precision fire control meant teams were engaging targets they'd previously avoided. Ammunition consumption jumped. Where a standard bazooka team might fire 4 to 6 rockets per day, M9A1 teams were firing 12-15. Supply chains struggled to keep up. Enemy countermeasures evolved. Japanese forces began using more Type 4 Chito medium tanks, which had thicker armor, 75 millimeters versus the Chiha's 25 millimeters. The M6A3 rocket struggled against this armor, even with perfect hits. American forces responded by targeting tracks and running gear. Mobility kills rather than complete destruction. Japanese infantry learned to target the distinctive rangefinder-equipped bazookas. Snipers specifically aimed for the gunner or the rangefinder itself, knowing the weapon's value. Between April 15th and May 20th, 29 M9A1 weapons were lost to enemy fire, a 1.6% loss rate compared to 0.4% for standard bazookas. The weapons were being targeted. Despite these challenges, the impact was undeniable. Between March 15 and June 24th, 1945, M9A1 weapons with T-43 rangefinders were responsible for 634 confirmed Japanese armored vehicle kills at ranges exceeding 200 yards. The average engagement range was 312 yards. The hit rate was 79%, more than 7 times better than standard bazookas at similar distances. Japanese tank losses on Okinawa became unsustainable. By late April, Japanese commanders were pulling armor back from forward positions, keeping tanks in reserve rather than risking engagement with American Devil weapons. This defensive posture gave American infantry freedom of movement they'd never had before. captured documents from the Japanese 32nd Army headquarters found after the battle included a tactical memorandum dated April 28, 1945. American infantry now possess long-range anti-tank capability. Tanks must not engage at less than 600 meters. Recommend dispersal of armor to prevent concentration of American fire. Note, Americans appear to have limited numbers of new weapon. Prioritize destruction of soldiers carrying large tube with optical device. They knew, and they were scared. The science behind the T-43 rangefinder was elegant in its simplicity. The system used a coincidence rangefinder principle developed in the 1890s for naval gunnery, but miniaturized and ruggedized for infantry use. Two prisms positioned exactly 6 inches apart, the base length, each captured an image of the target from a slightly different angle. The farther the target, the smaller the angular difference between these images. By adjusting the prism angles until the images aligned, an operator could determine the angular difference, which corresponded directly to distance. The mathematics were straightforward. Distance equals base length divided by tangent of the angular difference. The rangefinder's mechanical dial converted this automatically, displaying distance in yards without requiring any calculations. A trained operator could range a target in 3 to 5 seconds. The system's accuracy depended on the base length, the distance between the prisms. 6 inches allowed ranging from 100 to 600 yards with acceptable accuracy. Shorter base lengths would have been less accurate at long range. Longer would have made the weapon unwieldy. 6 inches was the engineering compromise. The optical elements were manufactured to tolerance of 0.02 millimeters, extraordinarily precise for 1945. The prisms were coated with magnesium fluoride anti-reflective coating, a relatively new technology that reduced light loss and improved clarity in poor visibility. The lenses were sealed against moisture with rubber gaskets and neoprene seals. But theory met reality in combat, and reality was harsh. The rangefinder required both prisms to maintain precise alignment. A hard impact, dropping the weapon, setting it down roughly, or firing from a prone position on rocky ground could knock the prisms out of calibration. When this happened, the rangefinder would give incorrect distances, sometimes off by 50-100 yards. Soldiers learned to test their weapons regularly against known distances. Calibration procedure took 10 minutes with a known distance target. The operator would range the target, compare the rangefinder reading to the actual distance, then adjust small calibration screws on the prism mounts. The procedure required a small screwdriver and steady hands. Many teams never mastered it, relying on battalion armorers for periodic recalibration. Humidity was the other persistent enemy. Tropical air in the Pacific Theater had relative humidity often exceeding 85%. This moisture would condense inside the optical system, fogging the lenses and prisms. Soldiers learned to wrap their rangefinders in waterproof cloth when not in use and to store desiccant packets, scavenged from ammunition containers, inside the protective covers. The elevation system had its own complexities. The M9A1 tube featured degree markings etched every 2 degrees from horizontal. A simple bubble level, similar to a carpenter's level, mounted near the rangefinder helped operators establish level. To engage a target at, say, 360 yards, the operator would range the target 360 yards, check elevation table, 14 degrees, tilt the tube up until the 14-degree marking aligned with horizontal, while watching the bubble level. Fine-tune aim using the optical sight, fire. The entire process with a trained team took 15 and 25 seconds from target acquisition to shot, faster than the 30 to 45 seconds required for standard bazooka teams to close distance for effective shots, and infinitely safer. Rocket ballistics introduced additional variables. The M6A3 rocket had a muzzle velocity of 265 feet per second, relatively slow, giving gravity significant time to pull the rocket downward. Wind also affected trajectory, though less than might be expected because the rocket motor continued burning for 0.4 seconds after launch, partially compensating for crosswinds. Experienced operators learned to adjust for conditions. Strong crosswinds, aim slightly upwind. Firing uphill, reduce elevation slightly. Firing downhill, increase elevation. These adjustments weren't in the manuals. They were field wisdom, passed from experienced teams to new operators. The weapon's limitations became clear through use. At ranges beyond 450 yards, even with perfect ranging and elevation, hit rates dropped below 50%. The rocket's inherent accuracy, its tendency to wobble slightly in flight due to imperfect motor burn, introduced enough deviation to miss at extreme range. Operators learned that 400 yards was the practical limit for reliable hits. The M6A3 rocket itself had limitations. Its shaped charge warhead could penetrate 4 inches of armor at 90-degree impact angle, but penetration dropped significantly at oblique angles. Japanese tank designers knew this and used sloped armor where possible. The Type 97 Chi-Ha's 25mm armor was easy prey, but the newer Type 3 Chi-Nu's 50mm sloped frontal armor sometimes defeated M6A3 rockets, even with perfect hits. Soldiers adapted their tactics. They targeted turret rings, track systems, engine compartments, and vision ports, vulnerable points where even tough armor offered openings. Mitchell's team developed a technique of firing 2 rockets in rapid succession. One at the turret to force the crew to button up, a second at the tracks to immobilize the vehicle. The Japanese had no direct equivalent to the range-finding bazooka. Their Type 4 rocket launcher, introduced in 1944, was larger and more powerful than the American bazooka, but lacked any advanced fire control. Japanese anti-tank teams relied on getting close, often within 50 yards, and using magnetic mines or pole charges rather than standoff weapons. This asymmetry gave American forces a decisive advantage. The war ended before the M9A1 with T-43 rangefinder could be widely deployed. By August 15, 1945, total production stood at 2,247 weapons. Plans for production expansion to 1,000 per week were canceled on August 20th. The final weapon rolled off the Rock Island Arsenal production line on September 3rd, 1945. VJ Day plus 2 days. The weapon's classification, secret, remained in effect until March 1953, nearly 8 years after the war. The Army wanted to preserve the range-finding technology for future weapon systems without revealing its capabilities to potential adversaries. Soldiers who'd used the weapon were instructed not to discuss it publicly. Official histories of the Okinawa campaign, published in 1946 and 1948, made no mention of the range-finding bazooka. Most surviving M9A1 weapons with T-43 rangefinders were shipped to the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland for study. Some were converted to training aids for developing the M20 Super Bazooka, the 3.5-inch weapon that would see service in Korea. Others were demilitarized, the rangefinders removed and sent to Navy ships as spare parts for similar optical systems, the tubes cut up for scrap. Only 47 complete M9A1 weapons with original T-43 rangefinders are known to exist today, scattered among military museums and private collections. The weapon is extremely rare, far rarer than standard M1A1 bazookas, of which thousands survive. The technology didn't disappear, it evolved. The M20 Super Bazooka, introduced in 1948, incorporated lessons from the rangefinding system, though it lacked an integrated rangefinder. The M72 Law, introduced in 1963, used a simpler but effective ranging system. Modern anti-tank weapons like the FGM-148 Javelin use laser rangefinders and computerized fire control, descendants of the basic principle proven in 1945. If you know the exact distance, you can hit the target. The concept of infantry portable precision fire control became standard. Today's soldier takes for granted that his weapons tell him exact distances and calculate ballistic solutions automatically. In 1945, this was revolutionary. Some rangefinding bazookas saw limited service in Korea, though records are sparse. Declassified after-action reports mention optical bazookas used by the 7th Infantry Division near the Chosun Reservoir in November 1950, engaging North Korean T-34-85 tanks at ranges up to 400 yards. But by then, the 2.36-inch rocket was obsolete against Soviet-supplied armor, regardless of fire control improvements. The nickname, One-Shot Devil, survived in Japanese military history. Post-war interviews with Japanese veterans consistently mention American Devil weapons that could kill tanks at impossible ranges. A 1957 Japanese military history, The Defense of Okinawa, includes a section on American technological advantages, specifically noting optically aimed rocket launchers that surprised Japanese forces. Staff Sergeant James Mitchell survived the Battle of Okinawa. He returned to Omaha, Nebraska in October 1945, having fired his rangefinding bazooka 47 times in combat, achieving 41 confirmed vehicle kills. He never spoke publicly about the weapon. The secrecy classification prevented it, and even after declassification in 1953, he simply preferred not to discuss the war. Mitchell died in 1987, aged 66. His obituary in the Omaha World Herald made no mention of his role in testing and employing one of World War II's most advanced infantry weapons. His family donated his papers to the Nebraska State Historical Society in 2003. Among them, detailed notes about using the optical bazooka, descriptions of specific engagements, and a letter from Captain Theodore Harrison, dated July 1945, thanking him for his invaluable contributions to weapons development under combat conditions. Captain Harrison continued his work on fire control systems after the war. He contributed to development of the M40 106mm recoilless rifle's integrated rangefinder and later worked on early laser range-finding systems in the 1960s. He retired as a colonel in 1967 and died in 1999. The range-finding bazooka was classified for so long that its story almost disappeared from history. It appears in no major World War II documentaries, few books, and almost no veteran accounts. Even dedicated military history enthusiasts rarely know it existed. Yet for a few months in 1945, on hills and beaches across Okinawa, it gave American infantry something they desperately needed: the ability to fight enemy armor on equal terms, at ranges that offered them a chance to survive. For the 634 Japanese armored vehicles destroyed by range-finding bazookas, and for the American infantry who didn't have to charge across open ground to engage them, that made all the difference. The men who carried these 21-pound weapons up Okinawa's hills never sought recognition. They did their jobs, used the tools they were given, and tried to bring their friends home alive. Some succeeded, some didn't. All of them faced death in ways most of us can't imagine, fighting an enemy who called their weapon the one-shot devil because it killed with precision they couldn't counter. Their story deserves to be remembered. If this video gave you a new appreciation for the ingenuity and sacrifice of World War II infantry, hit that like button. Subscribe and ring the notification bell. We're uncovering more forgotten weapons and unknown stories every week. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? Did any of your family serve in the Pacific? What obscure World War II weapon should we cover next? To the men who carried the range-finding bazooka into combat, and to all who served in the Pacific, we remember. Your innovation saved lives. Your sacrifice won the war. Your story will not be forgotten.